Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel and welcome to another anniversary episode. This is a very special one because it is a live and I do have Chris Stanley with me today. How are you doing, Chris?
Barry, doing very well, mate. Hey, everyone. Yeah, always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here, Chris. Now, it is 8 p.m. where Chris is, and it is 10 a.m. where I am, guys. And I know that most of my viewers will still be in their bed. It's probably like 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning where you guys are. So hopefully, if you don't get the live stream, you catch this one after the fact. So I did ask, just as I normally do with anniversary episodes, is I've asked you guys to leave your memories, and I'll select some of them to read out with Chris throughout this video. But today, what we will be discussing is A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 40th anniversary of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I chose Chris specifically. I've not told Chris this yet, but it must have been about 9 years ago, Chris, when I first came across your channel, your other channel.
Wow. Yep.
And it was you doing I don't know if it was a cosplay or just creating stuff for someone else's cosplay for Freddy Krueger. So I want to kind of talk about not how you get into all the cosplay and stuff, but how you get into specifically the Freddy Krueger kind of cosplay stuff, because the stuff that I seen even 9 years ago was fantastic. How did you kind of come about doing all that?
Oh man, it obviously all goes back to like seeing this VHS for the first time when I was a kid in the video store when like dad would take me grocery shopping. I'm like, I don't want to go. And he's like, well, go look in the video store, I'll come grab you. And I'd see this VHS, this particular one, and I'd see the back. And you got Tina, you got Robert, you've got Freddy on top of Marge. And I'm thinking, what I didn't know who Freddy was. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is there a man on fire on top of a woman in bed? Why is there a centipede coming out of this woman's mouth? What is going on? And then a few years later, my mum told me about Freddy and like, he goes into your dreams, he wears a sweater and he's burned and he's got this. And like, I hadn't seen a proper photo. I'm like, that sounds amazing. And then, yeah, like after that, I got into the movies, watched them one by one. And then I started building the gloves out of like, baked bean cans, Diet Coke cans, and then eventually, moving into the proper materials that they used. And this was during high school. And during all that, I started sculpting, throwing clay on like a glass display head and just trying to make something happen. I did like a part 1 bust, a Freddy's Dead bust. Got into like the old school plaster molds and making the latex masks, like the old monster masks. And then got into like silicon and resin, stuff like that. And yeah, been doing it ever since, man. Like, but before we came on here, I said flat chat with Etsy orders at the moment. So I've got to ship out 2 part 1 Fred busts. I've got a part 6 Freddy's Dead kit. So still going strong with them, which is crazy. Like, it's Freddy's been very good to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, the stuff that you've done with Freddy specifically, anyway, is what caught my eye on your other channel, and I'm like, what is this stuff? And then seeing all the stuff that you've done with like maybe even just figures that cost $10, that you make them look like hot toys. That's how very detailed that they were. So yeah, that's how I came across the channel. The glove behind you, is that New Nightmare?
It is, man. It's the 30th anniversary today. So this casting came from a gentleman who got an original casting that was a crew gift, which for the crew gift, they essentially used the same pieces for Robert's actual wearable glove, but they made like solid resin pieces. And he got a blank, took a mold of it, and I bought a blank off him and painted it, did all the blade work, the veins and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a beast of a piece, man. And then I have, this is my part 2 glove. My part 1 glove is currently on my mannequin, which is over there of Freddy with his fingers cut off. And I'd love to like have him over here, but he's so big and cumbersome. I wouldn't know where to put him.
They're stunning. You didn't send anything to Cecil Laird or anything, did you? With Dylan's New Nightmare? Have you seen Dylan's New Nightmare?
Didn't know, and I won't say anything else because I don't want to speak on behalf of Cecil, but we're currently talking about projects, which is exciting.
I'll say nothing else then, because I was just thinking there, like with that glove behind you, I'm thinking that would look really good in a movie, but that's all I'll say. That's all I'll say there. I'll go into the chat anyway. I know it's early days. There's 6 people watching, which is cool.
Oh, cool.
Jordan's here. How you doing, Jordan? Morning, Barry. Evening, Chris. Yeah. And Todd's here as well. Good morning, all. I live in Arizona.
We don't need sleep.
Oh, well, there you go.
They're
Well,
built different in Arizona.
yeah. Well, I think they're 8 hours behind, so I'm sure it's about 2 a.m. in Arizona. So that's good going, Todd. Very well done. Now you kind of touched on how you got into A Nightmare on Elm Street itself, seeing that VHS in the video store. Were you ever allowed to pick it up and rent it? Or did you
No,
just
I
go?
was
No.
not at first. So, funnily enough, I started my Elm Street journey in reverse. I saw Freddy's Dead first, and
Oh,
then, pardon me, I worked my way back, and this one was the first one that I watched. So, I actually feel like I got the good end of the bargain because you start with Freddy's Dead, where Freddy's just so silly and wacky and stupid. And then you finish on the first one when he's just dark, mean, barely says a word, hidden in shadows. And it was even the same with part two. I was like, whoa, like this is so dark and like Robert's nasty. So yeah, I was not allowed to watch it for a very, very long time, man. Because yeah, I think I found out about Freddy when I like properly was like 8. And then
yeah.
by the time it was like my like junior years in high school, that's when I watched them all pretty much.
Yeah. I think I was similar age. I must have been about 8 or 9 when I first watched A Nightmare. Maybe I watched it when I was younger and didn't remember, but when I first kind of took it in, I must have been about 8 or 9 when I watched the first A Nightmare on Elm Street. But I think it's possible that I watched part two first. For some reason in the UK, part two was quite popular.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why that is, but maybe it's the distribution rights that we had. I don't know. But part two was the one that I potentially watched first. But when it comes to the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, there's something about it, and I specifically remember this. When I was younger, I used to have a recurring dream
Mm.
because of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was me walking down my street, and I still remember it to this day. I would walk down the street, it was all dark, and there was a rock band playing music in the street, just so randomly. And then I would see bushes behind them, and Freddy Krueger would be hiding in the bushes. And every time I'd have to get past the rockers, past the bushes, and past Freddy before I could wake up. And it always happened. And that was after watching A Nightmare on Elm Street once. And I think that's what's great about these films is when you're younger, Wes Craven wants to get at your dreams. And when you're a
Mm.
kid, you probably shouldn't watch it, but when you're a kid and you watch it, it does get to you in your dreams. Did you ever have dreams about A Nightmare on Elm Street when you were a kid because of the films or anything?
I did. And very like descriptive like yours.
Mhm.
I used to have nightmares about Freddy on a pirate ship. But
Oi.
I think subconsciously, and I didn't know about this at the time because I was young. Many years later, when Robert would do interviews and he's like, oh, a lot of my inspiration was Nosferatu. And
Mhm.
obviously, that sequence of Nosferatu on the pirate ship when he wakes up and he comes out and he's out on the pirate
Oh,
ship,
yeah.
I had visions of Freddy like that with that silhouette. So obviously, subconsciously, I related Nosferatu because that was part of Robert's inspiration for the character, along with like Jimmy Cagney and Gunslingers and all that.
Mhm.
Um, that was my only real vivid one. Apart from that, I think I've just become so desensitized. Was the VHS market for Elm Street big in Scotland back in the day?
It was, yeah. Horror isn't massive in Scotland, but if you ask anyone about VHSs back in the day, it's usually A Nightmare on Elm Street movies,
Hmm.
and not even Halloween. I think A Nightmare on Elm Street was the big one for us, and Friday the 13th. I think anything that was kind of total horror back then we went for, whereas Halloween was more subdued and quiet.
Hmm.
So even though Halloween was big, A Nightmare on Elm Street was probably the biggest. I'm speaking on behalf of my whole country here, but I do think that the A Nightmare on Elm Street was bigger because when you go into the video store, I think what catches your eye is the cover for A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter what country you're in, the front cover for A Nightmare on Elm Street was always good. I don't know if you know the Graham Humphreys cover for A Nightmare on Elm Street. It was the blue and orange.
Is
I'm
that
not,
where it's Nancy, but Freddy's claws coming out of the sky?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was our cover. So that was the Graham Humphreys cover. So that just like
Okay.
that caught our eye straight away, and so we would always kind of gravitate towards that. So I think it was for us anyway in Scotland. It was pretty big, definitely pretty big. I will mention this as well. We're celebrating the 40th anniversary of A Nightmare on Elm Street. However, it came out, I need to read it out here. The 9th of November, 1984 is when it came out in the US, limited. And then a week later, it got its wide release on the 16th of November. So it's coming up to the 40th anniversary. However, Australia didn't get it to the 1st of August, I believe, 1985.
Yep,
And
that's
then
correct.
the UK, we didn't get it to the 30th of August, 1985. So for us, we're quite early, but in general, we're coming up to the 40th anniversary.
And as
That,
far as I'm pretty sure, this didn't come out until 1986 in Australia. I could be wrong, but obviously things were a lot slower then with like transitioning from going from the cinema to VHS back in the day. Like that was a big, like it took a long time, but yeah, we didn't get it till nearly a year later, which is insane.
I know. It's that really annoying. Like that happened till maybe the noughties, maybe about 20 years ago. It stopped kind of happening. Did you notice
Yeah,
that?
possibly. Like the whole video nasty thing, was that a thing as well in Scotland or just the UK?
Well, yeah, Scotland, UK, everywhere in the
Yeah,
UK.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was massive, and I think that kind of ruined a lot of the things. So the BBFC stepped in, and they would take their time with VHSs and stuff. So it's that annoyed us. Did you have anything similar like that in Australia?
We didn't, man. We really didn't. If anything, like the extra naughty ones were just like behind the counter at the video store, just on the shelf, and like you'd have to have your parents with you, or you'd purely just have to be an adult, an out of age adult. So like, yeah, like today for something to be rated R in Australia, it must be pretty bad. Like Terrifier 3 at the moment, they're really strict with checking IDs at the moment, which we'd never really, like, we're really chill. But again, if something's rated R, it must be bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a shame. But yeah, we would do over the counter or under the counter stuff in the UK as well. Even after like the video nasty era. But if those people were caught with those tapes, they would definitely serve jail time and or a fine as well. So it was really, really strict for all those years. But obviously, it's nothing like that anymore. But back in 1984, when it came into place, nobody wanted to get caught with those tapes. We still had them, but you just make sure you don't get caught with those tapes. Don't sell the tapes. Keep them for yourself. Make copies for your friends and family, possibly, but definitely don't get caught with them. I'll go back into the chat. There seems to be more people coming in.
Yeah, everyone's having a good old chat. 31 Hello's Death said the title card scene for the first Nightmare scared the shit out of me. It was just so eerie. I agree, man. That build sequence with the glove and like if you were seeing that for the first time in 84 or 85, like no one knows who this guy is. And just it's just so in your face when the title card comes up with that synth, that synth score. I love it.
I love the title cards that are memorable. That one specifically was very memorable to me. I think the latest one that I really liked was Evil Dead Rise, when
that was good.
The title came up behind the girl who was floating. That was really good.
Yeah.
And The Conjuring as well. The first Conjuring movie where the yellow font came up and the music just went, oh, because I was like, whoa. But yeah, that title card for A Nightmare on Elm Street is scary enough. And that was just before the film started as well.
Yeah.
Who have we got? Hellraider. Good morning from Salt Lake City, Utah. Love both your channels. Great seeing you two collab.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
In Salt Lake City as well. Again, it must be nighttime, morning time for you guys.
Every time I hear Salt Lake City, I just think of Halloween 4 and 5.
Oh, really?
So I'm pretty sure those were filmed in Salt Lake City.
I think they were, yeah. When I think of Salt Lake City, for some reason I think of ice hockey. I don't know why. I think maybe there was an ice hockey game in Salt Lake City one time. I don't know. Jordan said running through the sludge was constant. Oh yeah, that's right.
And not getting anywhere.
Oh, I still have those dreams. Like
same here, or swimming, and I'm swimming and I just don't move.
Yeah. what again, I don't know if A Nightmare on Elm Street had anything to do with our dreams as we progressed as kids got into adulthood. But yeah, I would be running and I'm just getting nowhere, or I'm skating or something, and I can't get anywhere. So you have those dreams as well, then? Yeah,
Dude, yeah. And I wake up in a sweat and I'm like, was I acting out my dreams? So because we were talking about the 4K before, Jeff Plews asked about the 4K release.
Oh, let's go
What's
into
your
it.
thoughts on the 4K release? So I have at the moment, Jeff, the digital download of it. I've saying to Barry before, I've got the physical copy on the way. It should be here this week. I've made comparison shots between the Blu-ray and the 4K, but I want to wait till I get the physical disc because that way it's not compressed like the digital download. So you see it up on your telly, physical disc, you know exactly how it should look. Most of the film looks spectacular. There's a few shots like when he clacks the glove when he first builds it and This Is God where they've really darkened it. And I'm like, you're losing all the detail of like the beautiful stains on the copper of the glove and the back plate. But daytime stuff looks like it's flawless.
Yeah.
But like you don't watch a Nightmare on Elm Street for the daytime stuff. So
well, that's true. Yeah. Again, like you said, maybe the physical media will be better with the blacks.
And keeping that grain, the film grain, because it helps. It helps with with the detail and stuff like that. You take that away and it looks AI.
Yeah. Jordan is from Scotland as well. Jordan said that it's talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street being accessible. It definitely was, Barry. I struggled to rent any Halloween or Friday the 13th till the 19th, but all the Nightmare on Elm Streets were available. And that's true because we maybe have one or two copies of Halloween in the video store, but A Nightmare on Elm Street, there was just lots and lots of them. I think it's because they had to get lots of copies because everybody wanted to rent this movie back in the 80s and the 90s. So it really was very popular. Twisted Locker is here. Morning, boys. Doing a bit of skiving and work to watch this one. The Boy. He's called The Boy now.
What's skiving mean?
Oh, sorry, you don't know. Skiving means like maybe hiding in the toilets or something, or not doing your work.
He's totally watching us while he's taking a dump.
Yeah, that's how much he means.
Skiving. I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's the Twisted Locker boys. It's Jenks and Curtis. And I accidentally called Curtis The Boy. So I called it Jenks and The Boy. So we've got Curtis talking right now.
Nice one.
There you go. And he also said Evil Dead Rise had the best title sequence.
Yeah, that was sick, man. That was some good use of mountains in the background.
Absolutely, yeah. The depth of field and the kind of layers that they used, fantastic. And they also said Nancy running up the stairs and it turns into slime is definitely something that would happen in my dreams. Either that or run in slow motion while everybody around me runs for their lives. That's 100% on point. That's exactly what happened to me all the time. That's crazy, isn't it? So we kind of spoke about the memories of A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I think obviously with A Nightmare on Elm Street, the biggest thing about that is Freddy Krueger. With Freddy Krueger, what's your kind of, even if you don't watch the movies, did you know about Freddy Krueger before? I know you looked at the front covers and stuff, but did you know about Freddy? Did your friends talk about Freddy even before you guys watched the movie? Because that seems to be something that I've spoken to people about.
Yeah, so after like Mum briefly touched on it, and I had heard the name Freddy Krueger, like I just didn't I didn't put a face to the name. And I remember going over to mates' places for sleepovers, and they were my age, and they'd tell me about the Greta "You Are What You Eat" scene from The Dream Child, and they essentially were just like, he pins this girl down and feeds her guts to herself, and I'm like, why? What is going on?
This.
And I'm like, what the hell? That's just insane. I'm like 8 or 9 years old. I'm like traumatized, and like they're all like, all right, good night, and I'm like in bed shaking. And then you watch The Dream Child and it's just so bloody silly. So yeah, and it was just hearing it from my friends, each like different deaths described differently. from my friends, Jennifer, who gets her head slammed into the TV in part 3.
Yeah.
Because those were the not going to say mainstream ones, but the main ones that kids would watch. Like the first ones, like I feel like more adult centric and heavier.
Darker.
It is darker. Wes knew how to psychologically damage his audience and make things real, whereas by the end, like by 4, 5, and 6, the dreams were so bombastic and fantasy based, whereas the first one, you didn't know when you shifted from reality to a dream, which I loved, because it just throws your senses out the window.
Well, the reason I asked about if you knew about Freddy before you even watched the movie, it kind of takes me back to, although it's not the greatest film, but Freddy versus Jason. I like the idea where people didn't even know who Freddy was, but in the film they're all talking about this Freddy Krueger character that they just never seen before, and because they're talking about him, they start to dream about him. And I think that's what happened to me in real life. Like, I didn't see a Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and if I did, I didn't remember them, but talking about them made me dream about Freddy Krueger, and I already knew what it looked like from pictures and stuff, but just seeing pictures and then talking about him made me start dreaming about this character. And it's funny because doing that before you watch a movie that's about this character who comes to you in your dreams, it's just the ideas that Wes Craven came up with for this was absolute genius, because it was so unique that he gets you in your dreams. And if you're a young kid and you're scared, you're going to dream about this guy constantly. And I'm like, whoa. One thing I want to talk about is I read about Wes Craven's semi-inspiration behind creating A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's about these, I think they're Vietnamese or Laos people who came over to the US.
I
Did you
hear the
read about
name. I'll hear Cambodian, and then times of Pol Pot, stuff like that. Yeah.
And they all came to the US. For the guys in the chat that don't know, these people came to the US, and I think there was maybe about 108 deaths that people died in their sleep between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. And at first they thought it was a disease that they brought over from their countries. So they got tested, and there was nothing that came out of the results to say that they were carrying any diseases or viruses. They just naturally died in their sleep. And it was usually people between the ages of, I think it was 25 and 44. There was one woman that died, and the rest of them were male. And to this day, they still don't know. And Wes Craven thought, that's interesting. Maybe I should use something like that as inspiration for A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is so bizarre. There's a few other stories I've read about how he came up with Freddy Krueger and stuff like that as well. But some really interesting points. So did you hear about that then, or did you read about that before?
I first heard about it when sorry, is that Gene Whitcomb? Hello, Chris. Hello.
Well, hi, Gene.
I first read it or saw it when the 1999 DVDs came out with the box set, the original box set with the special features. And it was just an interview with Wes Craven, Heather, Robert, John Saxon, and they're all like so youthful back then. And it was just Wes in a turtleneck telling the story of it, but he didn't brush over it. It was just, didn't go into detail. But then when Never Sleep Again, the 45-minute documentary for the Infinifilm DVD came out, that's when he really went into it. And that's when he dropped the name Pol Pot, like, during times of Pol Pot, the parents were giving sleeping tablets. He put the tablets under the pillow. They found a Mr. Coffee Pot in his bedroom. And one night, one of the victims woke up thrashing and screaming. And by the time the parents got to him, he dropped dead. And that's just like horrifying. Wow. But also, just to go back to the design of Freddy and how Wes engineered this gnarly character, like the red and green of the sweater being the two colors the human eye hate processing side by side, giving him burnt scar tissue as opposed to a mask, the glove that's something so unique, homemade, and not a butcher's knife, a machete. He's just this big optical monstrosity, and it's such a cool backstory.
Yeah. Another thing that I read is when Wes Craven was younger, his I don't know if his brother was babysitting him, and he was like 12 years old at the time, and it was raining outside. They got a knock on the door, and he looked outside, and there was no one there. And then he saw in the distance there was this man with a jacket on and a hat, and he thought that was really scary, and it kind of stuck with him till adulthood, and it's something that helped him with the designs of Freddy Krueger. Again, little small things like that. I don't know if are 100% accurate, or it's like kind of Chinese whispers where the stories change throughout the years. I kind of you only believe it if it comes from Wes Craven himself, but I don't know if that came from Wes, but stuff that I've read. But here's an interesting one. Do you know about this? What did you guys think of actor David Warner being considered for Freddy before Robert? Apparently, there are makeup tests online. I think I've seen those. Have you seen those?
So I can actually debunk that.
Oh.
He was considered. So yeah, he was considered. But in Never Sleep Again, like the 4-hour documentary, they said, or David Miller said he couldn't commit to the time. I don't even think he had signed on. So many people had told me that. And then they overlaid photos of quote unquote David Warner's test makeup. That's not David Warner, it's Robert. Like you can tell it's just a test bust that Miller had done. And I thought that too. I'm like, oh, whoa, that's what David Warner couldn't look like. But in the back of my head, I'm like, that looks like Robert. So as far as I know, I think there was a conversation had with David Warner and Wes. I think that's as far as it got, man. Like they didn't do a cast of his head or anything or costuming and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure Wes at one stage did want him. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That would have been interesting. Like obviously Robert's a classically trained actor, but by then, like David Warner, like he had a lot of movies under his belt. Like Robert, in December, I'm 36. I'll be the same age Robert was when he played Freddy in the first Elm Street. I don't know how to feel about that.
I'm past that. I'm past that already.
It's crazy. Like, yeah, like when I turned 28, I'm like, oh my God, I'm as old as Heath Ledger was when he played the Joker. I'm like, fuck. So yeah, I think it would have, like, he definitely would have brought gravitas to it. Like Robert did as well, but obviously it's like a much more experienced, classically trained actor. It would have been nice to see in like the multiverse where the franchise would have gone had David Warner like been Freddy all the way through to Freddy's dead.
Yeah. Again, I think with David Warner, I only knew about David Warner after movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street. So he got popular for me in the 90s, like Titanic, of course. Scream 2, that came out in the same year. But yeah, I think it would have been interesting to see someone else as Freddy Krueger had we not known about Robert Englund. Because we know about Robert now, you can't imagine anyone else for that role, for that timeline, of course. Obviously, we had the remake. But yeah. What did you think of Jackie Earle Haley?
I'll always say, man, Jackie Earle Haley wasn't the problem. Him as a performer, like, fine. Like, he's an Oscar-nominated actor. And I know you shouldn't rely on that because, you know, Jared Leto won an Oscar and then he went on to do some not so great performances. So Jackie definitely wasn't the problem. I'm not the biggest fan of the makeup because I know they went for realism, but because it's so realistic and like when the skin gets burnt, you lose the ability to express most of, and unfortunately you lose his performance in that makeup, as accurate as it is to a real burn victim. It's just a clunky, dark gray, depressing movie. And I know it's a horror movie and the subject matter is pretty full on with the way they change Freddy's backstory. You no longer want to root for Freddy when he essentially is a predator. And that's why they sidestepped it in the first Elm Street and just made him a child killer. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on the remake, man?
You know, it's not a bad film. I think visually it's good at times. Acting's okay in it, but I feel like it's funny because the biggest issue is Freddy, but the best actor is Freddy. You know, it's a shame because Jackie Earle Haley was good as Freddy Krueger. I think the story went a little bit too on the edge, and he didn't look that great. I also think that Katie Cassidy would have been a better final girl for
yep.
Because I was enjoying her performance. But again, so I really liked Tina in the original as well, because I thought she could have been a final girl. And I thought she was the final girl in the movie,
Mm.
the original, until she wasn't. And then it was Nancy. So it just shows you how strong Wes wrote those characters, because he wrote them equally as good as each other, that both could have been the final girl. And I wouldn't have minded had Nancy died first and Tina been the
Mm.
final girl, and then vice versa. So it's not too bad. Kind of leads
Yeah.
us on to this one. What's your favorite quote from the film? I don't remember a lot of quotes from A Nightmare on Elm Street, but the one that always stuck with me was, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy," on the phone. That's always the one that I always go back to. You get any favorites at all?
Yeah, man. To go back to your favorite quote, I love as soon as he said that you hear and then the tongue
That's right.
comes out of the
The
phone.
tongue.
My favorite is when Freddy goes over the banister, lands on the ground, and Nancy's like, "Come on, Freddy, come and get me." And he's like, "I'm gonna split you in two." And he's like clacking the glove. And I'm like, oh, that's so like metal. I love that. I'll split you in two.
And he didn't even say it in a comedic way. He said it in a dark, twisted way
No,
as well,
he
didn't
was pissed. Like he
he?
just got a sledgehammer smashed into his guts, fell over a banister, so he's gonna have the shits for sure.
Yeah.
Death Blues, this is God. Yeah, I didn't realize it until Dave McRae brought it up. And when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is God. I was like, whatever. But then when Dave like really dissected it, and like Tina's like, please God, and Freddy's like, no, the glove, like this is God. And I'm like, it's so simple, but so good. So good.
The boy said, "What's the scene that scared you the most?" The scene where Freddy walks through the alley with extended arms always killed me when I was really young. I would say that's my scariest scene as well, because anytime I had dreams about Freddy, I was always outside. And I think maybe that's responsible for that. What about you?
Yeah, like 20 seconds after that happens, and that's the one shot where Freddy's like, watch this. And just the
Yeah.
way he's lit, all you see is the glistening of the rotted teeth and Robert's like beady, darty eyes. And just his posture. And like that's why I've like posed my mannequin like that with the fingers cut off. But I also love when he cuts his fingers off, he looks at Tina, looks at his fingers, looks at Tina, and he's like, did you see? Did you see?
Yeah. Well, I'll read this one out. It's quite interesting. Do you think an Inception style nightmare film would work? I know both were parodied in Rick and Morty at the same time. As far as I remember with Inception, it's a dream within a dream. Did they
Yeah.
never do that before in A Nightmare on Elm Street?
Have
Maybe they
they?
did.
Did they do that in the remake? I'm trying to think.
I'm sure they must have done something similar to that. I know that in New Nightmare, they've done a dream outside of a dream, which is real life, basically, and then you
Yeah.
dream in real life. But if they haven't done that, that's a missed opportunity, surely.
I think if the writing's on point, man, it's hard when you're dealing with that to make sure your continuity's right. It's like writing a time travel script. I think if the writing's on point, that could be quite intriguing. Yeah.
I think with today's audience, I think they would maybe want to see something like that, something outside the box,
Yeah,
that
for sure.
if it hadn't been done before, then certainly get that done now. I'm going to go into some other guys' memories that I've asked before we've
Yeah.
done this video. There's some quite long ones, and there's quite a few. So I'm only going to read out a few of them, if that's okay, guys. So the first one's from Mark Thorpe. Mark said, this is his memories. Remember renting it out from my local video shop at the age of 10 one Saturday morning. I remember the shop owner going, "You're 18, yeah, I believe you." And he was laughing. Me and an old mate sat and watched it that afternoon. There we sat in dead silence. Loved every minute. Those first 20 minutes especially. I still think it's one of the best opening 20 minutes in horror. Rest in peace, Wes. Do you know, it's weird. Whenever I ask people their memories of seeing a film, not only do they tell me the memory, they can specifically tell me what day it was as well, like Saturday mornings and stuff. And I do the same thing. Like when I remember renting something from a video store, I always remember it was a Friday night, because that's when I went to go to the video store. When it comes to memories of films, it usually comes back to video store memories. Did you go to video stores a lot when you were a kid?
Oh my god, man! Yeah, like my mom and dad would have to pry me out of there, and I think that's where I got a lot of my like horror education because, and I've said this before in some of my previous videos, Australian horror VHSs, and we've actually spoken about this on the last video we did together. Australian horror VHS covers didn't hold back with what was on the back. Like they showed some horrific stuff. And I just had questions. I'm like, oh my God. And I'll see these pop up on eBay now. And I'm like, oh my God. Like it'll go into the deep recesses of the hard drive of my brain and be like, remember this? And yeah, like again, because like my parents would follow them around. So they just sent me across the road to the video store and they come pick me up. So just wander up and down the aisles, looking at all the action stuff and the smell. Video stores had this collective smell. I don't know. I'd want to bottle it and sell it. I feel like we could make a killing.
Yeah. I'd love to see a video store candle that you could light and smells like a video store, because I would buy that. It's funny because the video store to us back then was basically the internet. Like you would go to the video store to learn about horror films. You would read the synopsis on the back, look at the images, and that's the equivalent now of going on to Google and searching horror movies, and you would see pictures and synopsises and stuff. So that was our internet back then. So to get access to that, you had to physically go to this video store, and I would spend Friday night going in with my family, getting a movie to rent, and then on a Saturday, I would spend almost the full day in the video store. I would go about looking at the games, the films. I'd talk to the people in the store. They probably hated me. I would ask them if they've got any spare posters that I could take, and I would do that every Saturday morning, maybe from like 10 a.m. to like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. I would be there all day, every Saturday without fail. That's where I lived at the weekends. That was my life when I was a kid. Obviously, when you get a little bit older, you go less and less, and then you don't appreciate the video store as you get older until it's gone. And now that it's gone, I think we all kind of thought, why did we let that go? Because those were the best memories that we had, I guess.
Absolutely, man. I did the same as well. I hounded the video store owners for posters. And I remember when Batman Forever had come out on VHS and they had kind of finished their run with the initial release. They had all the individual character posters and they gave me all of them. Like when I was 5, I was 7, I was stoked.
Wow. That's nice. Again, those are the memories you always cherish. And I wish I kept all those stuff when I got freebies from the video store, just never kept any of them, which is sad. But we live and learn.
Yeah.
Next comment is from Jason Prouty. Jason said, I was 8 or so and had a big sister. So she always watched the stuff way too scary for me. Most of the movies she watched, I was able to sit through and maybe cover my eyes here and there. I specifically remember her watching a Nightmare on Elm Street where I listened from the kitchen and I would yell, "What's happening?" whenever there was a sound of an incident. So my first viewing of my now second favorite horror film, The Shining being my first, was from the kitchen. I think I was similar to you, Jason, where I would half watch the movie and do this. I go, oh, do you ever have memories of that when you're a kid, like watching a horror film or even a Nightmare on Elm Street, and just kind of watching through your eyes and it got better for you?
Funnily enough, Freddy's dead because I was terrified. And I got to the end of it and I'm like, what the hell was that? Also Scream, the opening of Scream, because when it came out on VHS here in Australia, it was massive with teens and adults. Like adults would just have parties and just rent Scream and watch it. I remember our neighbor across the road had rented it. Mum was watching it across the road and I went over and I literally walked in on when Casey Becker's boyfriend gets gutted. And I remember just hiding behind the couch and just peeking up now and then. And then when Casey got killed, I was like, I'm tapping out, and I went back across the road.
Well, that was some intro though. Like, I don't think it gets as bad as that as the movie progresses, but that was some intro to Scream. And if that was a film that you must have been about what, 10 then or something?
I was
11?
8. Yeah, 96 when that came out. Yeah, I was 8.
Oh, just a baby then. So watching that film, you'd be like, oh my God, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Let me go into the next comment. So Mediocrities said, I hired the VHS on a Friday night. Within a few minutes of watching, I was scared shitless. Ended up watching the rest of in the middle of the next day with the lights on, holding my He-Man figure. My older sister still brings it up and laughs at me. My sister does the same. Like, she'll go back to the time when I would watch a film and go, do you remember when you were holding on to your toys as you were scared watching the movie? Didn't have a He-Man figure, unfortunately. Oh, I did have a He-Man figure. Do you have any siblings?
No, I'm an only child,
No?
man.
Oh,
Yeah,
so you are, yeah.
all my mates have siblings. So like when growing up in high school, they're like, "Oh, my sister or my brother's so annoying," and I'm like, "I don't understand it." They're like, "Oh, you never understand. You'll just never understand the hate I have for my brother or my sister."
Oh, so you wouldn't understand like the teasing then. Like if you ever get
Mm.
caught by your sibling covering your eyes during a horror movie, then
They're never gonna
you
let
don't
that
live that.
down.
Nah, you don't live that down at all. Let's go back into the chat as well. Twisted Locker said, I miss video stores so much. Jason Lives always got a battering. I still collect X rental VHS. Yeah, Jason Lives was a popular one in the UK. Do you remember going to the video store and going for the one specific film all the time? Is there one that you would always rent?
Oh, dude. Oh my god. Home Alone 2, Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands. There's this niche little movie that Robert Englund's in called The Paper Brigade.
Oh,
Um,
I heard of that.
yeah, it's just about this kid that moves to this like peaceful little town and becomes a paper boy to earn money, and it's just hilarious. And Robert Englund plays this crazy old war vet that he has to deliver his papers to, but he like shoots BB guns and sets geese on this kid, and it's actually very charming. Do you remember Little Giants?
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I remember we used to rent Little Giants all the time, the Mighty Ducks. But
Oh,
it was like on repeat. I'd like go through all them and start again.
yeah. I would rent the Mighty Ducks all the time as well. Maybe that's why I think of ice hockey when Salt Lake City comes up. But
There you
Mighty
go.
Ducks is one I always rented. Unfortunately, I always rented Masters of the Universe as
Mhm.
well. Um, when it came to horror, I think we rented Fright Night was probably the one that we would rent the most because we didn't have that many back then. And even though it's an 18 in the UK, it was still kind of tame compared to other horror
Mm.
films. So Fright Night was the horror that we would always rent. But Universal Soldier as well,
Oh yeah, yep.
randomly. My dad would always rent that one. So yeah, some good time, some good re-renting. We would never
Yeah,
rent
for sure.
um, any Friday the 13th ones, unfortunately, though. Oh, I will be meeting Robert Englund next year at Horrorfield. Cannot
That's
wait. I didn't
awesome,
even know.
man. I'm
Is that in
very
the UK
jealous.
then? I did not know that. That'll be a big queue.
He's
Um,
always got such a big queue.
he will have. Hellraiser said, was there any truth to Robert wanting Freddy to meet his final end to Ash Williams in the unmade Freddy versus Jason versus Ash? I don't know. Do you know about this?
No, not really. Like Robert would joke about it, and then I think Jeff Katz, who used to be a head at New Line after Freddy vs. Jason, wanted to make Freddy vs. Jason versus Ash work, but they couldn't get the rights to Ash.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've never heard Robert mention it. I think he was keen for it though. He was intrigued by it. Like he just sounds like he's game for anything. But no, I don't know. I've never heard him say he wanted Frey to meet his demise at the hands of Ash. That would have been cool though. Like you
Yeah.
imagine that, like Ash is blowing him away with his boomstick in the real world when he drags him out of a dream.
It's funny because I think a lot of versus movies wouldn't work, but I think because Ash is so like he's got a lot of comedy, and I know that Freddy's quite comical as well. I think it can work, but it needs to be perfect because you don't want to run that fine line of it being really bad, you know.
I think because the Freddy steers more towards comedy than Jason, and then Ash is this bombastic comedy
Mhm.
I don't know if it will work. It sounds fun on paper, and obviously there's the comic series. You know about the comic series of the three of them?
Yeah, but I've not read it or anything.
I haven't read it either, but apparently it's pretty good. People dig it.
Hmm. Um, AG Hend said, I missed the large cardboard cutouts they had in the video stores. Oh, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
hence why I got into Nightmare. When I walked into the VHS store and saw Freddy standing, staring back and thinking, who's this? Yeah, I don't think we had a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 one. I think it was when the bus, when you get the standees, the cardboard
Is that when
cutouts.
he's like that with the bus?
Yeah, but the bus is like cut out in front of him. It's like a
Yep.
three-dimensional one. So the bus is in front with palm trees, I think, or like Californian trees, and he's standing under that in the background. Yeah, I remember some of the cardboard cutouts were very creative, but again, you can't get them anymore, which is a
No,
shame.
and there's dude, they are worth so much now, like flat packed mint, especially the Elm Street 4 home media standees. There's one of the house and Freddy's like around it, like that. They go
Mhm.
for so much. It's crazy.
Would you ever pick one up?
Oh man, I'd
That good?
love to. There, that part two one. We used to have an Elm Street 3 one of just Freddy like that. And I know the new Nightmare one that they're talking about. It's the one where Robert actually doesn't have that hand. He's got the full mechanical hand from the
Mhm.
beginning of the film, holding like it's obviously his hand holding the extension. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
full body shot of him with the trench coat, everything.
Mhm. Here's a question for both of us. J. Ashraf said, Hi, Barry and Chris. Question for you both. Do you agree with the direction they took Freddy down with the sequels of becoming this comedic jester? For me, the first two and bits of three have best Freddy. I mean, I think it gave him more character, I guess, but
Mm,
I think it runs a fine line with it becomes too comedic, like Freddy's Dead. But then I enjoy the comedy moments in Dream Warriors. So I think it runs a fine line. I would prefer not to see it, but I still quite like Robert Englund's comedy moments. So
mm.
yes and no for me. What about you, Chris?
I will always favor Dark Freddy. Like, I love him in part two, but part one, just, I think it just hit all the right notes. And obviously by the end, by Freddy's Dead, he's just he's as Dave McRae says, he's a fucking loser.
Yeah.
I love Freddy's Dead because like I've always said, I equate it to Samurai Cop or The Room, just really, really like schlocky, silly, like so bad it's good.
Yeah.
Um, oh god, and he's right. He makes a good point. You know, part one, part two, and bits of part three, Freddy are like prime Freddy for me, especially with what Wes originally intended to do with the character. You know, just
Mhm.
dark, barely says a word, hidden in shadow, and just mean, absolutely mean. But don't get me wrong, like it is fun to meme on, you know, part five, part six, Freddy. So
Yeah.
yeah, to me, part one and part two, yeah, that's the perfect balance right there of Dark Fred.
Yeah, I mean that I still remember. I know this isn't part one, but in part two, when he comes out of Jesse,
Mm,
and then he goes into the not yeah, he comes out of Jesse, and then he goes into the backyard where they're having the barbecue. That was scary. That was like prime Freddy Krueger for me. That was the scariest moment for me, like him coming out into
yeah.
the real world through Jesse's body. I'm like, oh, this is scary stuff. But again, as the movies progressed, they got less and less scary, which I don't know if they're trying to cater for a wider audience. Don't
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
possibly. But then obviously Wes Craven came back and done
Yeah.
a new Nightmare and thought, let's make this dark again, and he certainly did. Um, I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the video, though, because I've got a question for you with regards to the franchise.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so I'll go into another memory. It's from Jordan Moran, who's also in the chat. Jordan said, not really my memory, but one time my half brother, while staying at my dad's, ate a Chinese, as in Chinese food, not a Chinese person. Um,
Thank you for
just in case,
clarifying that.
just in case. Had a nightmare about Freddy, then redecorated my dad's spare room with his Chinese. Glad I wasn't there. so, so with
Jeez.
the Chinese food, I mean, so yeah, so must have been sick everywhere. So that's a really good memory, and again, that's something you won't forget. Like even if it's nothing to do with the movie, you remember the movie that you're watching. So
Mm,
you remember
yeah.
exactly what you were doing, what you were eating, and what came out of you as well. So yeah,
What came out of you both ends?
yeah, Chinese food went everywhere. So there you go. Um, Jordan also said here, I have a photo of me in the late 80s with my Schwarzenegger raw deal cardboard cutout. Oh, there you
Man,
go.
I
Raw deal.
remember that cover. It's Arnie, I'm pretty sure if I'm right, Jordan in the white singlet and he's got the gun
The
and the
gun, yeah.
tagline is, and I just say it in his voice, no one gives him a raw deal. And I'm like, oh my God,
Oh my
that's
God.
so cheesy.
I love the cheesy Schwarzenegger. Like one of my
Yeah.
favorite Schwarzenegger movies is Kindergarten Cop. And I think it's
Oh
because of
man, yeah.
all the lines like, it's not a tumor. It's so good. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll read one more memory out and then we can get to the last question, Chris.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
last memory is creative storyteller 35 said, I remember being very fascinated by Freddy since he could invade my dreams. Sorry, he could invade dreams. I also like how evil he is in the first one compared to the sequels. Well, that's exactly what we were talking about. Like
Yeah.
he's like the definition of evil. Even the words that he says, like you're talking about God and stuff.
Mm.
He's very menacing in the first one compared to the rest of them. Even the other dark ones like 2 and 3 and New Nightmare, he is like so dark in the first one, isn't he?
Yeah, again, just hidden in shadow, man. And just again, like Robert utilizing his beady eyes in that makeup, and he must have had a field day when they were testing the makeup and putting it on to like find like what works and then do the camera tests. So, and again, like the lines, yeah, this is God. I'll split you in two. Just
Yeah,
again, keeping the dialogue minimal, but it packs a punch.
yeah, definitely. Mark Jones said, "Morning, Barry and folks. Morning, Mark.
Morning,
We're
Mark.
we're going to wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so, Mark. So apologies if you guys want to ask any more questions, you certainly can. It's actually really good. I've got 17 people watching at 10:54 a.m. in the UK. That's actually not too bad for me. So it's good that people are actually still coming in. But my last question for you, Chris, is
Mm.
you've maybe answered this in one of your own videos, but for anyone who doesn't know, um, what's your favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie outside of the original one? Because I'm assuming the first one's your best.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So apart from that, have you got any other ones that you gravitate towards most?
Oh man, so it changes a lot. For the longest time, it's been part three,
Mhm.
and it switches around a lot. Like my busy brain switches them around. I'm gonna have to say Freddy's Revenge, and it actually I wasn't a fan of it at first when I'd first watched the film, but even though I was young, I was like, oh, there's such a difference between like one and two. Like, what is going on? Why does Freddy look different? Who's this kid? Where's Nancy? But they're in the same house. And I've really come around on it, and it's such a layered movie. But not only that, the design of Freddy, the redesign, what Kevin Yeager did with the makeup to make him look like a male witch, and again, how dark and mean he is in that film. And I love it. Like look, it's got so many silly moments. Like obviously Mark Patton dancing with a bloody thing, all that. I think it still has a lot of good going for it. And I'm glad it's sort of renaissanced recently with fans. And yeah, again, I think it just also just comes down to the characterization of Freddy. He's still mean, like he's still on
Mhm.
that high before part three happens. And then he becomes that MTV Freddy, and then eventually becomes a fucking game show host by
Yeah.
Freddy's Dead. Yeah, I'm gonna have to say part two, man. What about you?
I think I might be similar. Like, I'll need to rewatch them all again because I've not watched some of them for quite some time. So I will do like a rewatch of all of them. But after the original, it was usually between New Nightmare and Dream
Mm,
Warriors. But after watching part two more and more, I appreciate two more. And I think
yeah.
the reason that, well, this is my guess. My guess is the reason that part two was not favored when it first came out is because it's not Nancy. So I think when you're watching, you're like, oh, but where's Nancy? I want to see Nancy.
Mm,
I think people just wanted to see Nancy back, so they automatically didn't really like part two. But
yeah.
watching it, it's got some of the best moments in the franchise, some of the best dream sequences in the franchise. Even Jeff Plews said the bus nightmare at the beginning,
Yeah.
that was frightening. So there's
Yep.
some really frightening moments, some comedy moments as well. And
Mm,
I can never get it out of my head. The girl, Jesse's semi girlfriend in it, she always reminded me of Meryl Streep. She looks like a
yeah.
young Meryl Streep,
Yes.
doesn't she? Um, but yeah, I think for me, it's possibly part two. I will need to watch them all again, of course, but as far as I can recall, part two is sitting firmly in second place. Um, I'll do one last question before we wrap up, Chris.
Yeah. Cool, man.
And that is this one from Jordan. Seems like an obvious question, but do you think the next Nightmare on Elm Street should have an unknown or established actor? If established, who do you think?
I would not want an established actor. I would like a unknown, up and coming, but capable actor.
Yeah,
I think there's something to be said about Robert. Even though I wouldn't say he was unknown at the time, he had V going on. Like
yeah,
he was finding some mainstream success. I would still find it a distraction if, and I don't know why he was so adamant on Kevin Bacon, Billy Bob Thornton at one point. I would find that too much of a distraction.
yeah,
Um, I would definitely want an unknown, but again, capable to go to that dark place and be layered and really get into the character, and the physicality as well. So I
mhm.
would definitely want an unknown, man. What about you?
I would want an unknown as well. I think a lot of the reasons I want an unknown as well is because when you see people fan casting for Freddy Krueger, it's always the same names that come up, like Kevin Bacon, Will Poulter is a kind of recent
Jordan
one.
just made a good point. Walter Goggins is too famous now, but he was my choice. Walter Goggins is a great actor, but again, he's now way too mainstream because of Fallout.
Yeah, yeah, him as well. Yeah, Walton Goggins, he's a really good actor, and I've seen his name getting mentioned as well. So yeah, that's I wouldn't mind a known actor as long as it doesn't look anything like what he does in real life. But I think it is an off-putting thing. Like I didn't know who Jackie Earl Haley was when I
Mm,
first. Well, in fact, I did. I saw him in Watchmen. Watchmen came out
yep.
before. Yeah. So I only seen him in Watchmen, but again, he had a mask on in Watchmen, so you never really saw
Mm,
his face anyway. But he was probably as popular when he played Freddy as Robert was when he played Freddy for the first time as well. So they weren't fully
yeah.
known, you
Yeah.
know. So if it's going to be a known actor, I feel like it has to be someone who's just there but not mega famous,
Yeah.
but preferably someone I'd never seen before. And that puts people off because they're like, well, if I don't know who he is, then I don't want to see the movie. But people have to start somewhere, you know?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think again, as long as they've got the credentials and the chops for it, I think that shouldn't matter about a name.
Yeah.
And again, you'd ask anyone in 1984 who Robert Englund was, even after the first Elm Street, they'd be like, I don't know. Like most people out on the street, they'd be like, I don't know who
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, especially people in the horror community because they never done horror. I know V
Mm,
is more sci-fi, but don't really know him in the horror community. And it's the same with Jackie Earle Haley. Like he's not really known for
mm,
horror. So if you're bringing in maybe an actor that people do know, maybe make it their first horror film to see how they get on. Obviously, you don't
yep,
want to take risks, but sometimes a risk can pay off. So I would say an unknown or someone who's not Tom Cruise level of acting. You want someone that you think, oh, I know them from somewhere, but I don't. That's not too bad.
yeah.
So that would be that's the last question, guys. We'll kind of wrap it up. But before we go, Chris, obviously it's a pleasure having you on for a Nightmare on Elm Street. Ever since I saw your cosplay stuff and all those videos, because I think is Freddy your favorite horror? Or
He is. Yeah,
yes,
so
yeah.
the first Elm Street is actually my favorite film of all time.
Oh,
Yeah. I just love like the ins and outs of it, the backstory of it, the fact that that film should not have been made. They ran out of money, and it's got so much going on, like in front and behind the camera.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just such a damn good film. Like
yeah.
it's got so many flaws as well, but I think that's why I love it. It's the expression, you love and warts and all.
Yeah, Yeah, well, no film's perfect unless it's Back to the Future, but no
Mm,
film is, every film's got some flaws, and I think sometimes that's the charm for films when it's
yeah,
40 years old now. But celebrating the 40th anniversary of A Nightmare on Elm Street is amazing. And it's great to have you on because obviously you're a big fan of Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street. So it was a pleasure having you on, Chris. Um,
thank you,
in
mate.
terms of your channel, if anyone who is in the chat just now, if you want to tell people where they can find you and what you've got going on this October.
Yeah, so my main thing at the moment is my second channel, which is just Chris Stanley. So
Yeah.
that's like movie reviews, entertainment news, like just all talky stuff. But I'm doing a lot of Elm Street coverage this week. I actually just got the notification my Terrifier 3 body count video has been officially restricted to 18 and over. So that's great.
That's annoying.
And yeah, I've got my other channel, Cosplay Chris, which is, prop builds, custom collectibles. So that's all build videos, but I, keep the build videos separate from the talking videos. But there's much more traffic on the second channel because you're not building something. There's a bit more involved with that. And yeah, just Chris Stanley official on the old Instagrams. I don't really post as much on Instagram. Like I'm really trying to put the work in on the second channel, and it's really fun to just sit down, hit record, and just verbal diarrhea about what you're geeking out over.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I'm subscribed to both your channels and I watch both of them anyway. So that's something that I've done for years now for you, Chris. You're one of the first channels that I subscribed to when I created my YouTube account way back in the day. So it's a pleasure having you on. I'll leave a link to your Chris Stanley channel anyway. It'll be linked in the description and on the title as well. So if you guys have not been subscribed to Chris Stanley channel, not the Cosplay Chris one, but the Chris Stanley, just click the link and hit subscribe. You won't be disappointed. But if you stay with me for a minute, Chris, I'll say goodbye to all the guys and then we'll call it a day.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, Barry. And guys, thank you for the chat as well tonight. You guys have been awesome.
Yeah, I agree with that, guys. It's good to have everybody in from different parts of the world as well. Because again, we've got Americans in the chat. I've got someone from Australia talking to me from the UK. The time difference is completely all over the place. So I really appreciate everyone who's managed to come on. Obviously, the guys from the UK, I don't thank you because you should be here. But everybody else, then, yeah, there you go. But anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!